Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Erickson, here with you once again. We're just pumping out these episodes every single week, 7 p.m. Thursday evening. Sex is Medicine with Devi Erickson, bringing it to you. Another juicy and enriching and intimate conversation about sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. This evening, I have a dear friend and colleague of mine, Rosie Bitch. You've seen her before. She's one of our ongoing Ask a Sexologist participants to offer her wisdom and expertise in the field of sexology to all of you wonderful listeners. And today, Rosie and I are going to talk about how to overcome body shame, how to stop hating your body, to be blunt. And Rosie runs a program called Body Love, which is why I thought she'd be a perfect person to talk about this. And we'll be publishing a book. When can we expect that? Probably next year, 2022-ish?
2022, hopefully early 2022.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. So you can go to Rosie's website, rosiebits.com, to stay in the loop for this amazing book after you listen to all of our awesomeness on this episode tonight. So just wanted to share with all of you, like what inspired me to have this episode is partially seeing Rosie's advertisements, but also my own personal experience of being 46. I'm not ashamed of it. I think I look good. And that right there is revolutionary. It is a 46-year-old woman, and I'm not skinny. I don't fit the necessarily the standard, size 0 beauty standards. And I have before in the past. But at this stage in my life, at 46 and, weighing a little bit more than I have in previous incarnations in this life, I feel really good about my body. And so that's huge. That's huge because, as we'll talk about more as we get into this episode, I hated my body. Most of my life, I hated my body. I wanted to cut things off. I remember very clearly when I was 24 and I was a monk in North Carolina and I was standing naked in front of the mirror and, everyone around me is like, oh my God, you're stunning, you're gorgeous. And I was looking at myself naked in the mirror and I just wanted to get a razor blade and start cutting parts of my body off. Like it was so extreme and so severe. And I felt like I was tortured in my body. And no one could understand because, I think at the time I wore size 0. I probably weighed like 115 pounds, which for me is like, emaciated. But no matter how thin I got, I couldn't overcome what I saw in the mirror. And what I saw in the mirror was someone who had been distorted. Like really, when I looked at my body, I looked at my breasts, I looked at my thighs, they looked like these warped, distorted, like they weren't what everyone else was seeing. They were not what everyone else was seeing. And later I learned, that's body dysmorphia, right? But at the time, it was agony. And I felt that way for most of my life, regardless of my weight, whether, if I was thin, I was never thin enough. If I was not thin, then I was unlovable and disgusting and would never get married and all that stuff, right? That if you're 5 pounds overweight, no one will ever love you. That's kind of the story that we get, right? So for me, the most I could hope for was just feeling neutral about my body, just not hating it. And probably like 5 years ago or so, that's probably where I was. But it was remarkable to me looking at myself yesterday, getting dressed and being like, yeah, like I'm not a size 2 or even a size 6 anymore. I'm a, size 8 to 10, which is not large. I will acknowledge that, but my point is it's larger than I've comfortably been previously. And looking at my size 8, size 10 body and feeling good about it, feeling really good about it. And that was miraculous based upon, in comparison to where I came from. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation. That's my story in a nutshell. You, Rosie, you're starting a body love movement. So what's been your journey? Where did you start? And where are you feeling now in relationship to your body?
So yeah, I have a big journey as well. Like I started thinking deeply on this topic at about 18, 19, 20. I went through my teens. I'd gone through a lot of trauma prior to 13, and I actually went to rehab at 13 years old. So you gotta go through a lot of trauma to be so fucked up that you're in rehab at 13.
Dude, that's hardcore, Rosie.
Hardcore. That's some Drew Barrymore shit right there. For anybody of our generation, you'll know that. So, but you know, I went through this lovely time in my teenagehood where I actually had some normalcy, and I actually started to embrace my body and feel good in my body. You know, not 100%, but I was starting to like feel myself.
Right.
And then at 19, I went through some more trauma and I got pregnant. And I had this huge change. I went from being very, very like underweight. It's surprising I got pregnant, to gaining, I gained like, I think it was 88 pounds when I got pregnant, and I went up to 160 pounds. So that's a huge amount of weight. Not a, you know, that number wasn't a big number in reality, but what a huge change. And I went from being this kind of teenager exploring, you know, who I was for the first time to being a mother. And there was nothing in between,
Yeah. Wow.
right? There was no transition point at all. So for me, there was this huge, like, I hit a wall where I had finally been coming into, like, oh, this is my body. And having gone through a lot of sexual trauma that drives you out of your body, even believing that your body is your own. So doing that healing of here is my body to like, oh shit, I don't even know like whose body this is. I don't even know what this is. And then even having my place in the world from ingenue to mother, you know, by the time I was 20 years old, I was like a non-sexual. I didn't feel like I was a sexual or uh, desirable being anymore.
Yeah, so that Madonna whore complex, right? So that's another body image thing or self-perception thing that we have as people with vulvas and vaginas, is that when we become mothers, we no longer get to fuck.
We're
Right?
not desirable anymore. We're a mother, and so we're in a completely different category. We're not desirable. So I was in this place where usually you'd be exploring who you are, sexuality, and I was like, no, I'm a mom. I have to work. I have to do these things, and my body is just like, I guess I'm just gonna put it away somewhere. And I remember feeling the same way, like, you know, I think I got in the scale after I had my son, and I was like 115 pounds, but that felt like huge to me. And then I remember getting within a 5 to 10 pounds of what like kind of felt like a normal weight to me, and just being desperate. And I remember like touching my body and feeling like fat and feeling so like, ugh, like just disgusted. And I grew up like many of us did with a mother who was always dissatisfied with her body.
Mm.
Always. I don't remember a time that she had a good thing to say, and still to this day often is on a diet, doesn't have good things to say about her body. So to go through that rapid change with absolutely no framework in the 90s, where there wasn't any external framework, there wasn't this beautiful body love movement. It was like, you know, smoke your cigarettes, get yourself thin, because other that's your value as a woman. That's your value. So I knew there was more. I just knew, even at 20, I fucking knew there was more. I knew I was being sold some bullshit. I could feel it in my
Mhm.
bones. And luckily, I did like connect in the zeitgeist. There were people like Susie Bright as a sex activist and doing crazy stuff. I knew some sex workers who were just also like breaking out of early times of breaking out of these kind of societal norms. And I started to investigate even at 20, what does it mean to be able to feel good in my body? What does it mean to be able to be a woman and a fully connected woman? Right?
Mhm.
Not just what society says as a woman. And for me, that was intricately tied to my experience with finding my way back into my body.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started doing burlesque in my 30s that I really connected. So I've been doing kind of this like working through these ideas and reading, and you know, reading Naomi Wolf and people of the time who were saying different things, right? Like the beauty myth. I don't know if you remember that book in the 90s.
I mean, I didn't read it in the 90s. I haven't read it now. I was like off on a different planet in the 90s. So that's where they're like, woo.
So
But I've heard of it since and heard it that was groundbreaking work.
it was hugely groundbreaking. And I was reading this as like, because I was like a little old woman to some degree in my 20s. Like I had my own business by the time I was 25. I had 2 children. I got married. You know, I just was like, okay, I'm gonna do the things. But
Mhm.
I wasn't doing this thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Me, I wasn't getting deeply, you know, into my body until in my early 30s. And I found burlesque. And that broke me open, literally cracked me wide open. And it was finally somewhere where I could access my own sexuality, sensuality, and creativity And I started to see, like, it was miraculous because I could see all these other bodies, different sizes, shapes, age, gender presentation, like things I hadn't even, we weren't talking about. It wasn't a common conversation to talk about trans people out in the world 15 years ago, but within the burlesque community, it was, right? Like, you were talking about people were doing things called gender fuck 15 years ago, 20 years ago, right? That are part of our kind of common vernacular now. And you were seeing people on stage who were 400 pounds and fucking killing it and sexy as fuck. And within that realm, I finally started to be like, oh, like, in this realm of all of these little snowflakes, everybody's different, I somehow fit in. And it brought a reality back to my body. Like, you talk about body dysmorphia. I went into the health food zone. So for my children, I got crazy. I would cook completely. I was a mom with 2 kids, also running a business. I would cook from scratch. Like, even our tomato sauce, I would boil the tomatoes, peel them, like.
God, I want to be your kid.
Good cooking. They got some good cooking, but that's like kind of where I went with it. I was like, oh, I'm going to be the healthiest, rather than, I call it, rather than eating disorder, I had disordered eating and a disordered perspective. So I'd also get up early in the morning at 6 a.m. to do boot camps. And if I clenched my butt and saw cellulite on it, I was like, I'm a failure.
So that brings up a good point, because that was exactly that neurosis, that extreme attachment to monitoring so closely exactly what we put in our bodies is another way that shows up. Because I was sharing with you before, like, one of the ways I address this self-hatred of my body is I would torture myself through food. So I would have these really rigid, regimented diets. Like, I know there's people who are really into raw foods. The way I did it was like a Nazi. Like, cooked food would kill you. I really believe that cooked food would kill you. And so it was like this, like, really meticulous, like, neurotic orientation to eating food. Or I just wouldn't eat. I would fast for long and long and long periods of time to get rid of cellulite. Yeah. Right? Which nobody else could see but me, right? I'd be like literally crying, like, oh, I'm whatever, mutilated or whatever's wrong with my body from all these dimples. And people were like, I don't see anything. I was like, oh, it's horrible, right? And so, yeah, one of the ways that manifested was with this really, I just keep using the word neurotic because that's the way it felt, this really neurotic approach and meticulous monitoring of every little thing I put in my body, and torturing myself through what I ate, no pleasure, no joy, or not eating at all, to punish myself for having cellulite.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did the same thing via health, which is not health.
Nope, it's not.
It's not health. It's bullshit, right? My mom was on the traditional diets. And even, as a teenager, I went on those diets for fun. Everybody would go on, there'd be a new diet in some fashion magazine, but I was never that serious about it. Like I said, I felt pretty good. But as an adult, I suddenly was on these health, diets. So I remember even, my daughter wasn't even weaned, and I went on a week-long cleansing fast. I was like, oh, I gotta cleanse.
Yep, the cleanse. Because the reason I've got cellulite is because my gut's so disgusting. So I mean, the amount of bentonite clay I have drank and the amount of things I have put in my ass to clean my colon, like, I just got, no wonder I have some butthole trauma.
Right? And that was the same thing. I was doing these crazy things still to conform to a standard, even though I knew it wasn't true. I hadn't broken it down yet, like not the way I now at 47 can break that shit down. But I knew, I was like, this isn't true. And yet I got sucked into the idea of like, oh, this is health. So this isn't an eating disorder. This is about health. But if you think about it, you're nursing a baby how many times a day and you're going to fucking fast?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's not healthy. That's wrong. And there was no, what was wrong with my body? There were zero things wrong with my body. It was a healthy body who had given birth, who was actually creating nutrients for another human, sustaining another human life. How disordered is that to think there's something wrong with that body?
Exactly. And so much there. And so what this brings me to is, how did we get here to this place of hating our physical form? So like, there's so many facets to this too, but a couple of things that I've come to understand is, and this really resonated with me, is that type of uh, violence, desire to be violent to your body, and mutilation is symptomatic of trauma. Right? That kind of self-hatred, internalized self-hatred, is symptomatic of trauma. So that was revolutionary for me to understand, like, oh, it's not that I'm crazy. It's not that I have a disorder necessarily. It's I'm a trauma survivor. And one of the ways my trauma manifested was through this very distorted self-perception, which is a normal part of being a trauma survivor, having a distorted sense of self, whether that's your emotional self, your physical self, all of the above. So that's one of the things. But why does it even get to the point where we would turn that hatred and violence on our bodies? And that's where we get to our society, our environment. And I love how you immediately pointed out, like, your upbringing with your mom and the modeling that we see in our families and our relationships, and particularly in the media, of what it looks like, what it should look like to be desirable.
You know what? This is so, it's fascinating. It's fucking heartbreaking. I've been looking really deeply, like pulling back the layers upon layers upon layers about this. But I truly believe that this is a way that we are kept distracted,
Yeah.
female presenting humans.
Yep.
Because you know what? If we erase the time that we spend concerned about our bodies or our diet, or if we're desirable, you imagine what we'd actually be accomplishing. And it is constant. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry that to keep us distracted.
Yeah.
Right? It's part of colonialistic, capitalistic, and patriarchal society. And we're getting it all the time because we're told a couple things. Number one, our value as women is only to be desirable and then to procreate, and then there's no value, right? Once you go through menopause, your value as a woman is actually zero in our society right now. And you can see this in the fact that there are no scientific studies on perimenopause and menopausal women as to what's actually going on in our bodies, right? And it's ridiculous because as we age, we're getting wiser, our earning power gets higher, our ability to do things, because our children are growing up if we happen to have children. So our ability to be in the world is far higher as to what we can give, except for society says, no, you're at a zero. So we're truly bred and then indoctrinated with this idea that we have an expiry date. And then if we don't want to expire, we better stay young, we better stay youthful, we better stay desirable. And that means we have to be focused on this body 100% of the time, because otherwise, literally, we're going to be thrown out.
And what's desirable is usually thin and white in this
Exactly.
society. So let's just say that that's what's usually desirable. Definitely thin, usually white or white approximating.
And I have a client a student who she's a dear friend. She started off as a student and she's a dear friend, and I consider her actually a mentor. Things have switched around over the years of us working together. She's an Indigenous woman in her late 50s, and she would say to me at the beginning, she was like, Rosie, there's no pictures of me. Where am I? Where can I look to see women who look like me, who are sexy?
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, oh, like I'd never, as a white woman, I'm indoctrinated. Like I have lots of white images,
Yep.
and they may be distorted images, but still they're white images, right? White blonde images coming at me. And she like just kept putting this little bug in my ear as to like, okay, this is what I want. I want this. I want to see brown bodies, right? I want to see representations of women my age who look good. I want to see and she kept putting this little bug in my ear, which is actually a big part of writing this book as well, is her inspiration and my recognition of finally being like, oh shit. So I'm in my mid 40s, not seeing a representation of who I am in the world, but she's not seen a fucking single representation her whole life.
And what you said earlier about how when you moved into the burlesque world and started seeing body diversity, how that was what was so healing for you. And so it's the representation matters. We keep saying this. It is the exposure to diversity that heals this perception that there's only one right way to manifest as a yoni owner, a female identified person. And I was going to say something about that, but it went out of my head. So Mercury retrograde, it keeps happening. It's like an awesome salient thought. And then it's just like, whoop.
That's okay. That's okay. And I think this is so important that you get this. This is one of the things I teach in my class is, you know what, mix up what you're getting. We actually have some control now. So in my social media, I have lots of different bodies. One of the first things I did, because I just recently went through a time of hitting a low point with how I felt about my body again. And it's been about 1.5 years of really consistently refocusing, doing the stuff I teach other people to do to get connected again. But one of the things I did was change up my social media. And I was like, who am I looking at? And I was like, oh, I'm looking at lots of burlesque stuff. And I'm looking at these beautiful 22-year-old white women, thin, young white women for the most part, some diversity. But these were the people who kept coming in. So I changed it up. And so, of course, lots of burlesque stuff, lots of Tantra stuff. But I'm also like, you know, I make sure that I have lots of people of color in my feed because I have lots of people who are differently abled in my feed. I have lots of people who are different ages in my feed because you need to see representation of yourself, but you also need to see all these different bodies so that you know where you slot in. It's not.
So we can see the full expression of our humanity.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't want to see, I don't want to see just 47-year-old white women. That in and of itself will actually close me down again. I need to see the full representation, and within that full representation, then I fit. That is the big healing.
So you know what's so interesting is I was watching a movie over the weekend about permaculture. It's one of my loves. For those of you who don't know, I love to garden. If all like my retirement plan is farm with goats and I just want to be in the dirt all day. So that's Devi. So I was watching this film on permaculture, and the thing that this person they were taking a barren, unfarmable land and turning it into this like beautifully producing farm essentially. And the consultant that they brought in was he kept saying diversity heals the land. Diversity heals the land. If you don't have diversity, you're going to have problems. But if you have diversity, then everything in nature is able to find balance and equilibrium because nature is diverse. And so I think that that's one of the things why it's so psychologically damaging to us in this society to only see one version of acceptable beauty, because it's literally coded into us as human beings to value and celebrate and require for our wellness diversity.
And we know, you know what, it's discordant internally.
Yes. But we don't even know. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to say it's discordant internally, but we don't even recognize it. Because one of the things I remember that I so love and appreciate about you is a couple years ago, we were, doing things on social media. And I was just like, me and my assistant were just picking images of like what we found attractive. And we had like the skin color diversity going, but we didn't have the body shape diversity going. And I remember you very lovingly say, hey, this is great. And I'd like to see some different body shapes. I would like to see, I would just like to see body diversity, like shape diversity. And so what I wanted to express here is like how we're so conditioned that it goes under the radar. I thought we were doing diversity, but because I was showing images that me and my assistant found attractive. But from your view, having it really explored this diversity, you were able to like see my blind spot that I couldn't see of like, oh yeah, it's maybe skin color diversity, but where's the shape? Where's the ableness or ableism? Where's the sexual diversity with transgender people and same-sex people? So I just wanted to point out how under the radar our own bias very much is. So sorry to interrupt you there.
Oh no, that's okay. I love that point. And I think it's like taking blinders off, right?
Yes.
You just keep going. You're like, oh, I get this. And then it's like, no, there's another layer. And I think that feeling internally, like we all have it. We know something's not quite right. We know it's off. We know we're not seeing the full picture. Um, we can't pinpoint it though. You don't know what you don't know, right? And so as you get information, you're like, oh, that's it. Take the blinder off. You get more information, that's it. And I think, that's a big part of this is diversity, right, in all ways, and checking those blind spots, seeing like, okay, I think I'm seeing diversity, but actually is there another level, and is there another level? And as I look deeper and deeper, I do feel better. I feel better. I feel like I fit. I understand. I was going to say, I understand the plan. No, I don't fucking understand the divine plan. But it's like you get a glimpse of like, oh yeah, I wouldn't look at a tree and say, like, Ram Dass has this beautiful quote about trees. I wouldn't look at a tree and be like, oh, that tree's a bit too big. Or that one's just a little guy, and so he's kind of shitty. Or that's a willow, and I don't like willows at all. They're not worthwhile. You look out in nature and you're like, fuck, amazing, diverse. Yeah, I want to see all of this. It's all beautiful, and it's all beautiful because it's different. And as you see all these differences within us, the humanity piece, you do get to see the deeper levels of beauty, and it puts that, like, what actual beauty is into perspective, rather than this manufactured bullshit idea of what beauty is supposed to be.
Manufactured is the key there. And so one of the biggest issues of why we have this hatred of our form, and people with penises and who identify as men have it too, and it's incredibly prevalent. I was doing some research with female-bodied people. So I was doing some research before the show, and it was like 80% of female-identified people will hate their body, or I think it was like 97%. There's all kinds of statistics, right? So 97% of female-identified people will think at least one thought per day of how much they hate their body.
Well, I can tell you anecdotally, I think I get that word.
Something like that.
That after now, I've worked with hundreds of people, mostly female identifying. And out of all those people, I've had 3 who were like, I like my body. Wow. 3. And this is ages 18 to 65.
Wow. And how, tying this into sexuality, one of the biggest issues for many female identified people is relaxing enough in bed to enjoy sex because they don't like their bodies, right? Not being able to relax enough in bed because they hate their bodies. My thighs are too fat. Not wanting to have sex with the lights on because you hate your body. Even, like, again, I had this like perfect little 22-year-old body. I was a stripper. It was beautiful. Still was embarrassed and felt shame about it. Didn't want to be seen, right? So how can we fully relax and like claim our full orgasmic potential if we hate the body that we're in, and if every time we're like trying to like be intimate with a partner, we're consumed with concerns around our love handles or whatever, right? So it's a huge block to our ability to claim our full sexual pleasure as women.
It's a huge block for us to be able to claim any full sensual pleasure.
Amen. Yes. Yeah, if you hate your body.
If you hate your body when you're eating, you're thinking about what's wrong with your body, right? If you hate your body when somebody touches you, you're thinking about what's wrong with your body. Like, your ability to experience the world fully when you're hating your body. And often what happens is people don't, they'll stay in some type of maybe self-hatred loop, or maybe they learn to quiet that down, but they leave.
Yes.
They leave in the state, and they're actually no longer present in the body. And how can you experience the full experience of life when you're not fucking present in your body? You can't. You just can't, let alone sex, right? Sex is even next level. But even just living as a human in the world, you can't experience the full gamut of pleasure.
And this speaks to me so profoundly of some of the stuff we've been talking about on the show for a while now, which is how there is this schism in spirituality that is like, in order to attain spirituality, you have to deny the form. So this aversion and hatred and denial of the physical form is is infected, I guess is the right word. Even our spiritual psychology around our relationship with our physical form. The form is an obstacle to spiritual realization in so many spiritual traditions. So we're getting this from all sides. We got the media telling us, hate your body if you don't look like this. And usually what looks like this is, what movie directors who are essentially 15-year-old boys in 30-year-old men bodies find attractive. And then we also even have it from our spiritual traditions, which is just, regardless of what the form looks like, the form is to be hated and vilified and avoided. And so it creates this, in the mass consciousness, it creates this illness in relationship to our physical form on all these different levels. And one of the things that I loved about what you just said a few moments ago is that for you make a concerted effort to introduce diversity into your visual sphere, right? This is the looking and the seeing. And what I want to point out is you've made a concerted effort. So the point is that we have to want. We have to want to see more and embrace more and experience more diversity, because otherwise it will remain hidden to us. Because if we're just relying on our, the algorithms in our Facebook feed and the commercials on TV, we're only going to see this one narrow lens, this one narrow, view of reality. So if we want to have a more expanded view, we have to actively seek it out.
You do. And you have to do it again and again and again. What I noticed is, like, it took me really shifting, like you're talking about social media, actually really shifting the algorithms so they would even, because I was following a lot of people of color who I have as friends, but they weren't popping up on my feed, right? I was still getting all this like whitewashed, thin washed type of stuff. And it took, like, I had to really go through and really shift everything and be really conscious about, liking, saving, and then just adding so much more diversity into my feed before it started actually popping up organically. So, because like it literally is programmed that way. And truly, all of this is happening in a certain way right now in 2021, but this is thousands of years in the making. This is not new.
Yes.
Right? It is a way of keeping people misdirected and to some degree enslaved. And that's a heavy word, but certainly, societies that have been enslaved, and you're a Black American who has a lineage, who's lived through this, taking people out of the bodies is a key component, right? Raping women when you're gonna colonize, when you're gonna take over, is the foundation to actually destroying a culture.
Invading the body, and we can invade the body physically, but we can also invade it psychologically. I was just watching that series on Amazon, Them, which was horrific to watch. And at the same time, I loved how they brought to consciousness that internalized, racialized self-hatred that is so indoctrinated into those of us with Black bodies in North America, to hate the skin that we're in, and to prioritize and attempt to move towards whiteness at any and all costs. And so they do a wonderful job of portraying this in this show, horrific as it all is to watch. And so let's talk about healing, because we've kind of touched upon a few things. And one of the ways to heal that we've already identified is by inviting and consciously seeking out diversity. Right. So looking for what are some other bodies that look like mine that are doing dope things in the world. Right. And just having on our feed, our mind stream feed, on our radar, all these different manifestations or expressions of humanity. But here's a question in terms of that. There's also this thing of like, well, what am I just drawn to, right? What do I just like? And so how do we break out of that? Like, I'm just thinking of like, you're talking about your Instagram and it's all these, thin white women in the wellness industry. Well, if you're a thin white woman in the wellness industry, why the fuck would you want to expose yourself to diversity? Like, what would be the point of that?
Because you're still going to feel discordant. right? Like you're going to feel, and you're going to probably be like, I don't know exactly what's wrong, but you're going to feel a level of discordance. And like that high pressure is not good for anybody, even if you're a thin white woman. And what's amazing is the people who come to me often who have the highest, like you talked about being 22-year-old stripper, your body was perfect, I'm sure, gorgeous beyond belief. And you were like, you know, at the depths of despair. The people who come to me who have the most body hatred are usually the ones who are closest to what the stereotype of beauty is.
Whoa. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's huge.
It is huge because they are looking into such a like a thin little parameter of I've got to fit right here. And if I have one dimple on my ass or I go out by 3 to 5 pounds, my worth is lost. Whereas what I find is most of the people who come to me who are already outside that realm, maybe they're just differently abled or they're older, or you know, they're either very, you know, robust or very thin. They've found ways, they've already been living outside of that, and they've had to find their ways to kind of connect with their own beauty, right?
Yeah. So they've developed resilience.
They develop resilience. Yeah, absolutely. They develop resilience. And I think so. There's like two components to what we're saying. We're saying like you need to see yourself mirrored so that you know that you're normal, and you need to see diversity so you can figure out where you fit within the realm of humanity. And I think that part of seeing yourself, it needs to be actually taken away from an external view, an outside gaze.
Yeah.
So one of the things I get people to do in my classes, and this was taken from an incredible project my littlest sister did, she's a photographer and artist and all sorts of wonderful things. She did this project maybe 6 or 7 years ago called the Body Love Project. And she took pictures of 100 people, their body part that they loved the most. And then she did a gallery exhibit of it and a little story like, why did these people love? And so there was everything. Like I put in my boobs, I'm very boob proud. A friend of my son's put in his penis. People had eyebrows, like whatever, right? But there was all like reasons why. Some people put in scars. And so I started within my classes getting people to take pictures of the parts of their body they love the most, but also the parts that they struggle with. And one of the ways I've done some deep healing for myself over the last year is I started to turn that vision inward again and take pictures of my naked body again, because I was feeling so disassociated from who I was in my body. And through actually being able to look, it's been like, oh yeah, I'm not this thing I think I am in my head. I'm like this.
Yep.
And this, I can see beauty in this.
And that is so huge, because I was what I've been talking about, like where I'm at now in relationship to my body, like I said, I'm heavier than I was like 5 years ago, right? And 5 years ago, I'd be going crazy, like, oh, I need to do 500 steps a day. But now I look at my body, and I'm like, I look good, right? I'm like, I like my thickness. I got lots of booty. My boobs are awesome. I'm 46, and they're like, bam, right? Like, and I look and I feel awesome on my body until I watch videos of Jennifer Lopez. I'm like, I don't know, watching whatever. And basically until I engage in mainstream media, I feel really good in my body. But as soon as I start absorbing the mainstream standards of beauty, I'm like, oh, I really need to lose 10 pounds. I don't know. I was on Love and Hip Hop VH1 couples retreat when I was down there filming before I met the cast, because I was in COVID quarantine. I was freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, my butt's gonna be too big. They're gonna like throw out my clip. Like I was all the old stuff that I haven't dealt with in years, right? It was all that Hollywood stuff. And it was all this fear about like being around very thin white bodied people. And then when I saw the cast and these beautiful Black women and these beautiful Black men, I was like, oh, I'm home. Like, I can relax. Exactly. Yeah. But I was seriously freaking out, right? And I was unaccustomed to it because I'd say, you know, I don't, time's really whatever for me, amorphous for me, but I would say for at least the last year, potentially more, I felt comfortable in my body for the first time in my life. And and enjoy it, and enjoy the health and the strength and the fitness that I have to the degree. And I'm satisfied. It's not and I'll continue to work and cultivate that, but it's not coming from a place of self-punishment. Whereas before I would work out because I needed to punish myself for not having a 6-pack of abs. Now I'm like, ooh, I really like it when my tummy's a little bit more toned. So I'm going to enjoy doing 100 sit-ups for fun. Yeah. So it's such a different place to come from. And it's so fascinating how, I find it fascinating how easily, I'll say the contrast for me between just my natural self-love, like you were describing, right? Just looking at yourself and being like, yeah, this is beautiful. It's not the monster I have in my head. I'm actually pretty yummy. And then looking at the media and being like, oh no, I have to stop eating for a week now.
Well, and that's why we have to curate what we're taking in.
Yes.
Right? We really have to curate that and take those other bites little bit by little bit until we have the resilience to look out. Like what I've been noticing, you know, as I've been like deep it back into this body love journey over the last year, is I can look at Jennifer Lopez, and rather than feeling a longing like, oh, I wish my body was like that, I can be like, oh, that's a beautiful body. This body is also a beautiful body.
I love that. I love that. So being able to see that, like, that it's not an either or, it's like we all get to coexist. And that's the beauty of having diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how boring, and I've been saying this for years, and I've been believing this for years, how fucking boring if we have every person is some white Barbie doll. That's not interesting. That's not exciting. That's like, you know, you don't want a fruit salad of all bananas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and nature thrives with diversity, as we pointed out. Another thing that we haven't touched upon is the role of our partners, our intimate partners, in our sense of self. So we talk about this in terms of sexuality, and the messages that we receive from our partners in beds can either shut us down or open us up. But another advantage that I've again been recognizing in terms of my ability to love and embrace my body as opposed to just tolerate it is that every day I'm receiving messages of praise and appreciation from my husband. So that's partly why I can be the size that I am and not be freaking out, because my husband's like, I love your juicy ass. I love, you know, like, oh yeah, oh, you don't change don't lose a pound. Oh, look at all that woman, right? So, but if I was in a relationship where my partner's like, yeah, your butt's kind of big, and I have been in those relationships, I think many of us have, right? So my partner, oh, your boobs are saggy or whatever, then I'd be running down, I'd be tortured, right? I'd be suffering, and I wouldn't be embracing this expression of my body that I'm experiencing now. And I certainly wouldn't be having a healthy, easeful, peaceful relationship with it. So that outside, those messages that I'm hearing, not just what I'm seeing, but what I'm hearing, really help heal the brain and heal that distorted sense of self.
Absolutely. I think that partnership, but also friendship as well, right? Like that partnership can be so big. I've had that as, you know, where I've really felt like, you know, in partnership, like my beauty standard has to be high.
Yeah.
And I have to, you know, if I'm going to stay happily in this partnership, I've got to conform to a certain beauty standard, and I shouldn't age, and I shouldn't gain weight, or I shouldn't go through illness or any of the normal things. Otherwise, my relationship will be very shaky. And that is heavily detrimental to your self-esteem, as opposed to what you're saying, where, you know, the opposite is also very healing. And then also your friendships, or say taking a course like what I've got going on, we do a lot of positive reinforcement. Like one of the beautiful things is I've had a friend who's been really, you know, she's been such an advocate for me to get back into my body and into my sexy again, into my bodacious sexiness, which I usually am, which I lost sight of for a little bit. And just being like, look at you, woman, you're like 46, like, damn.
I know, damn, right? Damn.
We need to hear that. We need to hear those words of affirmation. We would call that tantric speech, right? When we're working around sexuality, we need that around our bodies. And just like, you know, when you have somebody who looks at your yoni and tells you how beautiful it is, how deeply healing that can be. I had a lover this last summer, a really important, beautiful experience with a lover this last summer, right after I visited you guys. I went out to the Devi homestead. And I was actually quite worried, and I was really open with him. So when I had seen him, I was much thinner. It was like 5 years ago. I was kind of like, I was touring my one woman show. I was feeling pretty, high on the horse when it came to my sexiness, feeling like a queen. And I wasn't feeling like that last summer. I was really working through some stuff, and I've gained weight. I'm, almost 47 now, or I was 46 last summer. And I just said, I was like, I'm a little worried about this. And I didn't even know whether he and I were to make love. And he was very sweet and kind because we had been previous lovers. And he was just like, no, let's just hang out. Like, I really want to hang out with you. Let's see each other, see what happens. And we did make love. And I remember him looking at my naked body, and he's like, so what's wrong with this body? He's like, you had that body. That was a great body. This body is also a great body. Like, I don't see the problem.
Yeah.
And hearing those words were so healing. And I actually hear that when I start to compare myself again, to even a different version of myself. I'm like, actually, what's wrong with this body?
Yeah.
There's actually nothing wrong.
Yeah. I mean, society will tell us that there's all kinds of things wrong, but truly, truly from the inside out, what's wrong with this body?
Nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into another component of body love, which I've been exploring with my class just last week, which is actually what's beauty. What is beauty?
Exactly.
And when you get people to talk about beauty, they are not describing the things that you see in social media or on those movies, or like, Jennifer Lopez is the most beautiful woman in the world. Amen. But if you meet her in real life and she doesn't have components of empathy, compassion, or humor, or whatever, she's quickly not going to be beautiful. We all know people that we've seen and we're like physically drawn to them. And then they open their mouths and you're like, that's a fucking ugly person.
Wow. Yeah, true. Beauty's only skin deep.
Right? Like what is true beauty actually radiates. And usually the people who actually are truly beautiful, even if they're not, say, traditionally or stereotypically beautiful, but when they have all those qualities of character that radiate beauty, you are instantly drawn to them.
Yeah.
And then later you think, oh, maybe they had a really big crooked nose or awkward teeth, or maybe they're far bigger than what is societally acceptable. But that's not, like, when you're experiencing their beauty, none of that is relevant. You are just in the presence of radiance and beauty.
Beautiful. So in terms of healing, how do you get over our body shame? And I that's a title we're probably gonna use for the show, but I do want to say that it's not even a case of like, it's something that we have to overcome. I don't want to put that in our awareness. Like for me, as you described, it's been more of a shedding.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you said before. It's really about letting go what the society has told us is appropriate or accurate or acceptable or, worthy ultimately. And the society is pretty fucking sick. So, do we really want to be carrying those messages around, or do we want to look no more into the bitter glass, shall we say, and choose a different reflection? So the things that can help us is exploring, inviting and actively seeking out diverse images, hearing praise and appreciation from lovers and partners and friends. Like I love, like, oh my God, like I love the beautiful people in my life that I get to celebrate their beauty. It's awesome. And so surrounding ourselves with those people who communicate positive messages back to us, that's really helpful. And then in the little bit of time left, what else has helped for you in healing that distorted self-perception, healing that body shame? For me, it's been Tantra. For me, it's been all the aspects of the meditation to heal my traumatized brain, the sexuality and orgasm to heal my traumatized brain and body, the movement practices to cultivate wellness as opposed to, this extreme version of fitness, and then the communications that I receive from the outside, and then transforming my communications internally. What are some of the tools that you've used to help come to this space of love and self-acceptance?
So I would absolutely agree with you. With all of our, what we do tantrically is incredibly healing. And then I would pull out a few things to focus on. I had talked about taking that view of your body. So taking a look, because first of all, what it's going to do, and I would say, photograph your body. What
Mm.
it's going to do, and photograph all the angles. Because number one, it'll normalize what you see. So you're not surprised when you look in the mirror. You're going to start to normalize what your body actually looks like. And then you're going to start to see beauty in it. Movement, move that body, get in the body. At the beginning of the conversation, we talked about how we can't even, if we're out of the body, we're not actually having a full sensual experience of the world. So do whatever you do. You know, you and I dance, Davy, because that's who we are. But whatever you need to do to get in your body, get in your freaking body, right? That's deeply, deeply important. And I had a third, but it's also Mercury retrograded out of my brain.
well, well, when your book comes out, we'll do this interview, and it won't be in Mercury retrograde.
No, and I'll have many more than 3 points to add. And I actually do have many more. So people can look me up and I can give them more pointers because I've got more than the 2 I just gave you. But I think those, like, if you start there, that's a lot. Oh, and yeah, continuing to curate what you decide, what's going to come in. And I would say also, like, make a decision. I no longer will be ruled by these outside forces. I do not want to be distracted from the important things that are happening in society and from what my part in the world is. And when I'm buying into this shit, I'm distracted all the time. I need my full brain space. I'm a smart woman. I have shit to do in the world.
And I no longer want to suffer. Like,
100%.
that's what it is. Yeah, like ultimately it's making the choice. Like, I no longer want to suffer this ailment that is not yours to carry. You were not born with it. It's learned behavior. Hating your body is learned behavior, just like having sexual shame is learned behavior. We don't need to carry other people's burdens anymore, my friends. Let's release them and let them go. Therapy might be really wonderful if like for me, the root cause of some of the distortions is the trauma. So really, I would say, you know, how we get over body shame is by really taking on healing, right? Because that's actually the antidote, is this body shame as poison. So let's heal. Let's transmute that poison.
Absolute healing and doing, and this is where the tantric aspect of what we do is so important, healing and working it through somatically.
Yes.
Right? Because I know a lot of people who've done a lot of talk therapy and they still have issues with their body and they need to get into that body. They need that somatic part and then learn how to stay in here safely.
So therapeutic support that is somatically based. Yeah. And that's part of what we offer at the Institute, and that is what you offer in your courses. So tell us more once again about your website. Oh, I do want to say that for those of you listening, if you want a shot of body love every day, follow Rosie Bits on Instagram and Facebook. If you're on there, the pictures that you put up are beautiful. Like, if you're wanting to invite more diversity, like there's pictures of you, but also pictures of like other people. It's like your page is like a celebration of humanity. So if you want your daily dose of human celebration, definitely follow her on social media. And then tell us about your websites.
Thank you. So rosiebits.com is my website, and I'm just finishing my pilot project on Body Love 101 right now, but people can sign up on the waiting list because we will be diving deep into it in the fall. I've got the book coming out, but all of my courses, whatever you do with me, has a foundation of body love in it. Like, this has been foundational. And then I finally was like, oh, you know what? It's in everything. I actually should maybe focus on it a little bit.
And it's so needed and so necessary, because again, especially, you know, when we're talking in the field of sexuality, that self-hatred and that shame of our physical body is a huge obstacle to our experience, like in every area of life, but then particularly focused on the sexual experience. So it's so needed to have a dedicated course to just really focus on healing those neural pathways and reclaiming a sense of just, you know, again, just, it's hard to go from like hating your body to loving your body, but having that middle ground of just even feeling neutral about your body, no longer actively hating it.
Well, and I talk about it, like, the work that I do is really utilizing both the body positivity movement and the body neutrality movement. Like, I actually because I think the road to healing is through that body neutrality, first of all, but then we're going to still seek out beauty. So redefining beauty, as we were talking about, actually really getting into what beauty is, which is diversity, which is actually not about physical attributes, is like the second part to that.
That's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. So we're literally reframing, and I use the word rewiring a lot because I always see like these old neural pathways in my brain when I talk about this. So we're reframing and rewiring what we understand beauty to even be from a humanistic perspective.
And we start to see things differently, right? We absolutely, you start to reprogram that. You don't just see your own body differently, but what you're attracted to, what you find beautiful, what you're open to shifts, and your world opens up.
Wow. So there's a lot to celebrate.
So much, so
Yeah.
much, so much.
On the other side. Yay. Well, thank you so much for joining me at the last minute, Rosie, to have this beautiful conversation that was inspired by my own celebration of embracing the physical form and the beauty of your work that I get to see on my feed every day. And thank you, listeners. I hope this has been nourishing for your soul, because for so many of you, so many of us in the society, it is an extreme source of suffering. And there isn't an easy answer, to get from A to Z, but it is a journey and it is possible. And I think that's what I really wanted to share with you all, that there is healing possible, and that we do not have to suffer this self-violence and the self-hatred for the rest of our lives, that we can move through neutrality into a place of love and celebration. And that is our birthright as humans. We were born loving these forms and appreciating these forms. Let's go out of this world saying thank you for the ride. It was a beautiful journey, my friend. And then go get another body. So so thank you all for listening this evening. Let us know how this landed for you. Feel free to send us stuff at connect.authentictantra.com. Love your questions. Love your thoughts. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media accounts at Authentic Tantra. And make sure you subscribe to the show, Sex is Medicine, in YouTube, and all of our wonderful free offerings that are here to support you in reclaiming your birthright to peace, joy, happiness, openness, connection, and love for self and other. Have a beautiful night.